But how much time will the substance take to become equal on both sides? So that depends on the rate of simple diffusion, and there is a law known as Fick's law which defines the factors which are important for rate of simple diffusion. So there is a concentration gradient. If the concentration gradient difference is more, logically also it should take less time for the substance to become equal on both sides. Then thickness of the membrane. So if thickness of the membrane is more, suppose, will it take less time or more time? See, the substance will have to cross a thicker membrane, so it will take little more time for it to cross the membrane. Then area of the membrane, surface area of the membrane to which the substance is exposed. In this case, area of the membrane, if it is more, then the rate of simple diffusion will be more. And then there is one thing known as diffusion coefficient, which talks about the properties of the substance, that is its solubility and the molecular weight of the substance. So rate of simple diffusion will be more if it is more soluble, that is more soluble in the lipid, and it will be less if it is a big substance, its molecular weight is high. So it is, this diffusion coefficient is defined as solubility divided by square root of the molecular weight of the substance. So this is how Fick's law gives the factors defining the rate of simple diffusion. So logically we can understand it by just considering that what will be the factors which affect rate of simple diffusion. When we put it in equation, it gives the Fick's law, which is in this case is given for a gas. So here this symbol denotes the rate of diffusion for the gas is equal to the diffusion coefficient of the substance, okay, multiplied by the concentration gradient. So this is the difference in the partial pressure of the gases. That's why it is written P1 and P2, because for gases we refer the concentration gradient in terms of partial pressure difference. Then multiplied by the area of the membrane, as we said earlier that rate of diffusion will be directly proportional to the concentration gradient and as well as the area of the membrane. Now this divided by the thickness of the membrane, because rate of diffusion is inversely proportional to the thickness of the membrane. So this is the Fick's law. Now will temperature affect the diffusion of the substance? Yes, temperature, if temperature is more, diffusion rate will be faster, because if temperature increases, the kinetic energy of the molecules increases. So they will be hitting the surface, this membrane more. So increase in temperature causes increase in the rate of simple diffusion. So what are the examples of the substances which are transported by these mechanisms? Well, there are lipid soluble substances, that is the steroid hormones. Then there are the gases, very essential gases for us, that is the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So here is an example being shown where this is the alveoli and here this is the blood vessel. So oxygen transport from the alveoli to the blood vessel and the transport of carbon dioxide from the blood vessel to the alveoli both occur by simple diffusion, because these gases are lipid soluble and they diffuse based on their partial pressure difference across the membrane. Okay, let's move on to the second type of passive transport mechanism, that is the facilitated diffusion. So as the term indicates, facilitated diffusion, that means we want something which should facilitate the diffusion of the substance. So yes, there are certain proteins present on the membrane. So these proteins are known as channel proteins or carrier proteins. Now these channel proteins are the ones which is like a door. It like opens and allows the substances to pass through them. So that is a channel protein, and there is a carrier protein. What carrier protein does is that on one side of the carrier protein there is a binding site for the substance. So the substance can bind to the site. Once the substance binds to the site on the carrier protein then flips and releases the substance onto the other side. After releasing, it comes back to its original site so that the binding site is again made free for new substance to bind to it. So, for facilitated diffusion, we have channel proteins and carrier proteins which will facilitate the transport of the substance. So, what kind of substances need to be transported by facilitated diffusion? Obviously, since it is a diffusion, so it is a passive transport, so it will follow the concentration gradient only. However, if the substance is not lipid soluble, then it cannot be transported by simple diffusion, isn't it? So, for those kind of substances, we need facilitated diffusion. So, we need channel proteins and carrier proteins for those kind of substances. Now, when we consider facilitated diffusion through channels, we have to see whether these channels are always open or there is something which can regulate the opening or closing of these channels. So, what are the factors which regulate opening and closing of channels? There are various ways. So, first method is voltage gated. So, that means these channels are gated by the voltage. Let's consider an example. So, here is the cell membrane and here it is showing that the membrane is at resting membrane potential. So, this channel is closed. So, at resting membrane potential, channel is closed. But as the voltage across the membrane is changing, that is the membrane is getting depolarized, the channel is opened. So, these are voltage gated channels. The change in voltage across the membrane is causing the opening of the channel. Now, depending on that which ions the channel is allowing, we have voltage gated calcium channels, voltage gated potassium channels or voltage gated sodium channels, then chloride channels may also be there. But remember that once the channel opens, it will always allow the movement of ions from its higher concentration to lower concentration, that is along its concentration gradient. That's why the energy will not be used. So, if we are considering potassium channels, when they open, potassium will always move from intracellular fluid to extracellular fluid because potassium is more inside the cell. On the other hand, for sodium channels, sodium will move from outside to inside the cell.